Hi, my name is Troy Parfit, and I'm the author of 5 books, including War-Torn, Adventures in the Brave New Canada, and a satirical novel called The Bigot, or How I Learned to Love Donald Trump. In this video, I'm going to begin by furnishing you with an overview of Jordan Peterson's belief system. Let's jump in. Jordan Peterson's ideology is predicated on the individual. As Peterson says, the individual person has always been the originator of human progress. However, individuals can only retain their individuality by giving the collectivist radical left a wide berth, hence why Peterson reminds his followers of the Marxist-inspired horrors of the past by scribbling remarks like this. The masses of illiterate Russians were not fired to communist revolutionary enthusiasm by reading the theories of Karl Marx, but by promises of paradise made by thousands of agitators in the service of an idea. It is just typical of our pig-headed intellectuals. In the same vein, JP warns of the dangers of children falling into the hands of false, ignorant, or evil-minded teachers who want to put young learners on the ideological conveyor belt toward becoming neo-Marxist or postmodernist extremists, or the next Joseph Stalins. Instead of pursuing formal education or Marxist indoctrination, individuals should heed Peterson's 12 rules and assume a posture. They ought to become persons of upright character who stand straight. With their backs in alignment and their gaze true and aimed forward, they can proceed to the next phase of their guru's self-help regiment, occupying their place in the dominance hierarchy. Once inside this metaphorical paradigm, they need to exude strength. As Peterson explains, the individual has to regain his own physical strength and possess the strength to stand up. After becoming strong and upright, individuals must take responsibility. Peterson says that responsibility can and must be borne by the individual. It stands to reason that if you take responsibility, you cannot shirk responsibility, hence why Peterson denigrates the shirking of responsibility and teaches his individuals that everyone has to carry his share of the burden. To be sure, life in the dominance hierarchy is no picnic, and that's because life is suffering. Perhaps you're familiar with Peterson reminding his individuals, in the manner of a fire and brimstone preacher, of their pain and suffering, endless suffering, and the suffering weighing upon mankind. Life in the dominance hierarchy gets even darker and more difficult because on top of all the suffering, individuals must be willing to make great sacrifices. In so doing, they can transform from ordinary men, Peterson has specified that his individual is male, into victorious heroes who exhibit heroic courage, a process which can be facilitated by emulating the great heroes of our past. Peterson identifies as an exploratory hero and encourages his individuals to imitate him. Exploratory heroes need to occupy their territory, take up the sword, and slay the dragon. Since the Doctor's philosophy is predicated on self-improvement, it's only natural that he counsels his individuals to climb the ranks of the dominance hierarchy, a model that takes the form of a pyramid, an Egyptian pyramid, above which floats the all-seeing eye of Horus, the Egyptian sun god. But remember, the Jordan Peterson phenomenon is not a cult that borrows symbolism and nefarious concepts from other cults, or even the occult. On this point, all of Peterson's cult followers agree. Anyway, when describing Horus, the god that watches over the dominance hierarchy, Peterson makes reference to the privileged position of the eye and says people must be awakened, keep their eyes opened, and pay attention. What he means is individuals must be alert and pay attention to the problem, and they should grapple with the problem, because individuals are also lobsters, and lobsters grapple. After grappling with the problem, individual lobsters ought to focus on finding a way for the solution of the problem. Problem solving is synonymous with establishing order and overcoming chaos. Order and chaos being the two opposing forces that exist within the dominance hierarchy, which is aspirational. Think of it as an infinite ladder. At the top there's a leader or watcher, but even if there weren't, ordinary lobsters would struggle to reach the top. Most would continue to trundle about the lower rungs, or hierarchy's base. Put another way, they would perennially constitute their leader's base. But getting back to problem solving, the problem is other lobsters, or what Peterson calls opponents. Opponents want to occupy Peterson's lobster's territory, but his crustacean brigade must prevent this by putting their claws up to grapple. They have to clean up their metaphorical room, or engage in what Peterson calls a tremendous domestic cleansing, so as to occupy their opponent's territory, thus ensuring that the dominance hierarchy expands. JP's lobsters are orderly, whereas other lobsters, or opponents, are chaotic. After eliminating the chaos, Peterson's typically white, male, working-class, heroic lobsters can walk with God in the garden. In other words, the gloomy and burdensome dominance hierarchy can blossom into a verdant Garden of Eden. And there you have it, an introduction to the bizarro philosophy of Jordan Peterson, which he filched, mostly from the belief system of Adolf Hitler. In the passage you just heard, I quoted Hitler some 20 times. Did you notice? I cited Peterson about 5 times. Have you read Hitler's Mein Kampf, Zweites Book, also known as Second Book, or Table Talk? Have you read Hitler's speeches, or Hermann Rauchning's Hitler Speaks? What about Peterson's 12 Rules for Life and Maps of Meaning? Do you see how easy it is to insert other people's language into spoken text without the listener realizing it? Peterson does this routinely. To give you an example, he has said, "I've always thought of Nietzsche as, like, a maggot in a wound. What he's doing is clearing away dead and diseased tissue so that something else can live." He then talked about Nietzsche's Superman, which he has said was a concept the Nazis pulled off. The Nazi Superman was the Aryan. The subhuman was primarily the Jew. Hitler, who admired and borrowed from Nietzsche, called the Jew the international maggot in the body of the nation, and said, "On putting the knife to the abscess, one immediately discovered, like a maggot in a putrescent body, a little Jew." Again, Peterson talked about dead and diseased tissue in conjunction with a maggot in a wound, and Hitler wrote about an abscess in conjunction with a maggot in a putrescent body. The chances of this being a coincidence are extremely low. Let's go through Peterson's philosophy again, this time with the aid of plagiarized speech. Once more, let's jump in and start with the all-important individual. Hitler, nothing can take the place of the individual. Peterson, I came to a more complete personal realization of what the great stories of the past continually insist upon. The center is occupied by the individual. Hitler, the individual person has always been the originator of human progress. Peterson, individual persons embody mythological themes. Remember, individual persons must shun formal education or Marxist indoctrination. Hitler, the masses of illiterate Russians were not fired to communist revolutionary enthusiasm by reading the theories of Karl Marx, but by promises of paradise made by thousands of agitators in the service of an idea. It is just typical of our pig-headed intellectuals. Peterson, communism in particular, was attractive not so much to oppressed workers, but to intellectuals, to those whose arrogant pride in intellect assured them they were always right, but the promised utopia never emerged. Instead, humanity experienced the inferno of Stalinist Russia. Hitler, it is a national duty to prevent our people from falling into the hands of false, ignorant, or evil-minded teachers. The mission of educating is always the best above all. Peterson, the humanities have been dominated by a kind of postmodern, neo-Marxist, what would you call it, cult ideology. And so they've abandoned their mission to students. Their mission should be to teach students to speak, to think, and to read. Individuals don't need no education, says the man with no education degrees. They need strength and good posture so they can stand up to Democrats, who are really Leninists in disguise. Hitler, the individual has to regain his own physical strength. Peterson, strengthen the individual. Hitler, strength to stand up. Peterson, strength to stand, strength and daring to stand up. Hitler, one man could and must stand up. Peterson, they can and must stand up. Hitler, assume a posture, put in a defensive posture. Peterson, attend carefully to your posture, posture as an indicator of dominance. Hitler, how lovely are boys and girls, how bright is their gaze, how healthy and fresh their posture. Peterson, walk tall and gaze forthrightly ahead. The next step, if you will, is taking responsibility. Hitler, his willingness to take responsibility. Peterson, the willingness to take on that responsibility. Hitler, take upon oneself the entire responsibility. Peterson, aim to take on bigger responsibilities. Hitler, I had to proceed as sole bearer of responsibility. Peterson, bear the weight of our true responsibility. Hitler, heavy responsibility. I would not have been able to bear the responsibility. Peterson, heavy responsibilities. A responsibility too heavy to bear. Hitler, absolute responsibility is being adopted. Peterson, the absolute personal responsibility. adoption of the responsibility. Hitler, responsibility can and must be borne by the individual. Peterson, the totalitarian denies the necessity for the individual to take ultimate responsibility. Hitler, each individual was to stand up for his actions and take the entire responsibility. Peterson, each individual has ultimate responsibility to bear. In case any individuals need to have it spelled out, in the dominance hierarchy there will be no shirking. Hitler, the shirking of responsibility. Peterson, the desire to shirk that responsibility. Hitler, the miserable cowardliness of our so-called intellectuals who shirked the duty of offering serious resistance. Peterson, the decadent makes his intellectual superiority an article of faith and shirks his responsibility. Individuals need to bear a burden because life is suffering, and when cult leaders remind their individuals about life suffering, it can make them feel vulnerable, thereby priming them for further exploitation within a structure where social groups are constantly trying to dominate one another. Hitler, it may be that we shall have many a heavy burden to bear. Peterson, a burden, a responsibility too heavy to bear. Hitler, everyone has to carry his share of the burden. Peterson, the willingness of everyone to shoulder the burden. Hitler, pain and suffering, suffering and pain. Peterson, pain and suffering, suffering and pain. Hitler, suffer the same fate. Peterson, suffer the same fate. Hitler, personal suffering, human suffering, endless suffering. Peterson, personal suffering, human suffering, endless suffering. Hitler, suffering from blindness, having suffered so terribly. Peterson, willful blindness, to suffer terribly. Hitler, suffering from hunger and privations. Peterson, food deprivation or hunger. Under extreme privation, there are more important things than food. Hitler, the attempt of these international criminals to bring such suffering upon mankind. Peterson, the terrible suffering of mankind, the death camp of the Nazis. Peterson does love his Nazi death camps and tells his individuals that working in one would bring him happiness. But he's not a Nazi. There are no Nazis, and there never were. He's just being honest about, wanting to brutalize and murder Jewish men, women, and children in a human slaughterhouse. I mean, who wouldn't want to work 40 hours a week in a death factory? Life is suffering, and sacrifices must be made. Hitler, come forth and make voluntary sacrifices. Peterson, heroism requires voluntary sacrifice. Hitler, willing to sacrifice. Peterson, willing to sacrifice. Hitler, willing to make great sacrifices. Peterson, willingly undertaking the sacrifices necessary. Hitler, however great the sacrifice that may be necessary. Peterson, you make the necessary sacrifice. Hitler, to risk and sacrifice everything, even his personal livelihood. Peterson, to sacrifice everything, including, and most importantly, your life. Hitler, but greater sacrifices had to be made. Peterson, what is the greatest possible sacrifice? Hitler, the greatest blood sacrifices, the greatest sacrifice which a human being can make for his country. Peterson, the greatest of sacrifices, of self and child. Hitler, the sacrifices of the women and children. Peterson, a mother will sacrifice herself for her children. Making sacrifices can help turn ordinary lobsters into exploratory heroes. Hitler, victorious heroes. Peterson, the hero emerges victorious. Hitler, heroic qualities, heroic spirit, heroic courage. Peterson, heroic qualities, heroic spirit, heroic faith and courage. Hitler, heroes of the past, the great heroes of our past. Peterson, heroes of the past, the great heroes of the past. A line from a children's song, Adolf Hitler is our savior, our hero. Peterson, the hero is the first person to have his internal structure reorganized. His descent into the underworld makes him a savior. There's one story about Hitler. He won a medal for heroism. Well, Hitler's going to put up a front that says, I'm your savior. Heroes need to occupy territory, take up the sword, and slay the dragon. Hitler, the Jew, does not ever think of leaving the territory which he once occupied. Peterson, what if two lobsters occupy the same territory, at the bottom of the ocean, at the same time, and both want to live there? Hitler, as soon as the Allies occupy a territory, order collapses. Peterson, take your place in the dominance hierarchy and occupy your territory. Hitler, the territory occupied. Peterson, the territory occupied. Hitler, the right to occupy foreign territories. Peterson, conquering and occupying a territory already inhabited by other human beings. Hitler, describing a Marxist demonstration. I stood dumbfounded for almost 2 hours, watching that enormous dragon which slowly uncoiled itself there before me. Peterson, the giant dragon that lurks under your bed and in your forest. There are dragons everywhere in the world, and they're representative of something, like if you share a Marxist ideology. Like Hitler, Peterson is talking about the Jewish Bolshevik dragon, as seen in this propaganda poster. According to Peterson, when individuals occupy territory, the borders of the dominance hierarchy expand and must be defended. The dominance hierarchy has 10 levels or ranks, and individuals should climb through the ranks. Soaring above the top rank is Horus. Hitler, one does not reach the higher level of the infinite ladder without first having climbed the lower rungs. Peterson, Hitler climbed up the ranks of the hierarchy in a remarkable manner. Hitler, the hierarchical organization of a cult. Don't you see our party must be of this character? Peterson, people identify with groups because they want to organize themselves, protect themselves, and have some reasonable probability of climbing the dominance hierarchy. Hitler, many European states are like pyramids, standing on their apexes. Peterson, in my vision I could see great stratified multi-storied pyramids, all full of people striving to reach each pyramid's very pinnacle. Hitler, the privileged position of the white race. Peterson, the privileged position of the eye. Hitler, they rendered adoration and reverence to the sun god. Peterson, Horus is the sun god. Like most of Peterson's ideas, his allusions to being awake, keeping one's eyes open, and paying attention come from Hitler. Being awake is a neo-Nazi dog whistle derived from the slogan Germany Awake, which meant Germany needed to be awake to the problem of the Jews. Hitler, take up a firm stand on this outrage on our culture. Become awake to the Jews. Peterson, how can a person who is awake avoid outrage at the world? Hitler, once you heard the voice of a man. He means himself. It awakened you, and you followed that voice. Peterson, but Hitler was paying attention to the crowd, and some of the things he said made the crowd really wake up and listen. Hitler, it can wake up people, open their eyes. Open the eyes of others on the Jewish question. They are opening wide their innocent eyes. Peterson, to stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open. Hitler, to keep one's eyes open. Peterson, keep your eyes open. Hitler, our eyes are open. Peterson, we can open our eyes. Hitler, we opened the eyes of the entire German Volk. Peterson, their eyes opened. Their eyes were opened. Hitler, the eye of the beholder. Peterson, the eye of the beholder. Hitler, in the wink of an eye. Peterson, in the blink of an eye. Hitler, the scales fell from my eyes. Peterson, the scales fell from his eyes. Hitler, National Socialism must open the eyes of our people in regard to the real enemy who menaces the world today. Peterson, that is how culture maintains itself, but it is necessary to aim at your target, however traditional, with your eyes wide open. Hitler, all their activities tend to turn the attention of the people away from the necessity of fighting against a common enemy, namely, the Jew. Peterson, it's much easier to turn your attention away from the truth and remain willfully blind. He means to the problem of the Jews. Hitler, Mr. Chamberlain did not pay sufficient and persistent attention. Peterson, we have not paid sufficient attention. Hitler, attract public attention with other problems. Peterson, attract enough attention, attract public attention when the far worse problems. Again, once individuals become awake to the problem, they need to grapple with the problem, because individuals are lobsters and lobsters grapple. Hitler, and that is the point to which we National Socialists have to grapple. Peterson, level 3 involves genuine combat. This time the now enraged lobsters come at each other viciously, with their claws extended, to grapple. With claws extended, lobsters need to grapple with opponents. Hitler, I have taken on many democratic opponents, and have always emerged victorious. Peterson, its victorious opponent, on the other hand, is more likely to win. It's winner-take-all in the lobster world. Hitler, the beaten opponent, very often loses faith in the effectiveness of any further resistance. Peterson, in the aftermath of losing a battle, Regardless of how aggressively a lobster has behaved, it becomes unwilling to fight further, even against another previously defeated opponent. After grappling with opponents, or the problem, individual lobsters should find a way to solve the problem. Hitler, finding a way for the solution of the German problem. Peterson, a step on the way to solution. Hitler, problems await their solution. Peterson, if the problem has a solution. Hitler, to solve the problems of the world. Peterson, the world is full of unresolved problems. Hitler, solution to the problem, solution to the problems. Peterson, solution to the problem, solution to the problems. Hitler, to solve a problem, to solve the problems. Peterson, to solve a problem, to solve the problems. Hitler, the problem which must be solved. Peterson, a problem that must be solved. Hitler, solution to this problem. Peterson, solution to this problem. Hitler, faced with problems which can be solved. Peterson, the problems I now faced had been solved. Again, the idea of solving the problem is like that of establishing order and overcoming chaos. Aryan order and non-Aryan chaos. Chaos and chaotic were words Hitler used to describe the Jews. Hitler, establishing a new and better order, for us, the revolution. Peterson, every revolution produces a new order. Hitler, a new order will be established. Peterson, re-establish order. Hitler, new and better world order. Peterson, new and benevolent order. Hitler, we know how to put something like that in order. Peterson, put the things you can control in order. Hitler, a new order has begun to crystallize from a state of chaotic conflict. Peterson, new order can emerge from catastrophe and chaos. Hitler, I overcame chaos in Germany. I restored order. Peterson, we can make order from chaos. Be aware that Peterson has shown his students the cover of a book of Hitler's speeches called My New Order, and Peterson's third book is called Beyond Order. Problem solving is also the same as cleaning one's room. As Peterson has admitted, his famous exhortation is metaphorical. He probably felt he had to say that, because his lobsters thought he meant they should clean their bedrooms. Crypto-fascism meets mass imbecility. Anyhow, if lobsters grapple with and solve the problem, thereby cleaning their metaphorical room, or living space, they can achieve paradise. As I've mentioned in other videos, when Hitler wanted to commence the final solution, he instructed his underlings to turn the Reich into a Garden of Eden. 12 Rules for Life features this sketch of a German painting called Garden of Paradise. Peterson never mentions that it's German, or that its original name is Paradiesgärtlein. See the guy behind the tree? That's St. George, and at his feet lies a dead dragon. Think of the Bolshevik dragon, and know that this painting of St. George slaying the dragon was official Nazi art. And what statuette does Peterson have in his house? One of St. George slaying the dragon. What's an image he included in Maps of Meaning? St. George slaying the dragon. Let's have another look at Paradiesgärtlein. Observe how its inhabitants are preternaturally white, and how it bears some resemblance to this painting, which is called Water Lilies and was produced by the Third Reich as a model of official Nazi art. Peterson has taught about official Nazi art. Observe how the scenery in Water Lilies has been cleaned up so as to only leave Aryans. Hitler, the tremendous domestic cleansing. Peterson, clean up your room. Hitler, a vast plan of extermination, an internal and total cleanup. Peterson, the Nazis decided they would clean up the mental asylums. He's talking about mass murder through forced euthanasia. Hitler, I walked with Mussolini in the gardens. Peterson, to walk with God in the garden. Hitler, we will engage this enemy of mankind and do battle with him, and break the destructive will of the Jewish capitalist and Bolshevik world. The enemy of mankind, that is, Aryan mankind, is the Jew. Peterson, the snake features in the Garden of Paradise as the creature who is the primordial and eternal enemy of mankind. Know that Hitler referred to the Jews as serpents and vipers, and the Third Reich as the Garden of Eden. Hitler, the Jew is pictured as the incarnation of Satan and the symbol of evil. Peterson, the snake in the Garden of Eden was also Satan, the spirit of evil. Translation: the Jew in the Third Reich was satanic, the symbol or spirit of evil, and had to be destroyed. Remember, Peterson is a crypto-fascist. The Jordan Peterson phenomenon is a massive, mainstream neo-Nazi cult, an awkward fact completely missed by the media. Far from outlandish, my claims are supported by evidence and reason. What's unreasonable is to refuse to examine or critically engage with evidence. That's the sort of methodological approach taken by people who would join QAnon or the Jordan Peterson movement. It's patently anti-scientific. Basically, people who are skeptical about or dismissive of my claims have a choice. They can choose arrogance and mysticism or science and rationality. The Devil and His Due is a work of investigative journalism. It's not a hoax. It describes a hoax perpetrated by Jordan Peterson on just about everyone. If you'd like to continue being the victim of a sick joke, then by all means, do not read my book. Thank you for listening and viewing. Feel free to hit like and subscribe.